So this will be the video lecture for experiments in agriculture and horticulture. If you're looking at the PDF, you'll find that the text boxes that have the little outlines on them summarize the video for you. All right, so first we have to know, what is an experiment? An experiment is a systematic investigation of plant responses to experimental treatments. We're trying to discover new knowledge. And so it's important to know, what type of knowledge are you looking for? Are you looking to see if this fertilizer works better than that fertilizer? Are you looking to see if this growing system is better than that growing system? If you have your corn plants spaced 4 feet apart, do you get more or less in the field than if they're spaced 3.5 feet apart or 2 feet apart? Because maybe they get more or fewer ears on them with the different spacings. So it's important to know what you're looking for. If we look at a lot of test plots, this is a test plot here, then you will see that we're trying as much as possible to randomize things. We are trying to do different treatments. We are trying to do this in an artificial system as much as we possibly can. Why do we want it in an artificial situation? Because then we can control as many things as possible. A lot of even the ag experiments will start in a greenhouse simply because everything can be controlled in the greenhouse, and then you know outside what you might be looking for. The keys to experimentation is repetition, repetition, repetition. Repeat the experiment as many times as you possibly can. Have as many plants as you possibly can. Repeat it with as many plants as you possibly can. Randomize things so that you can eliminate uncontrolled effects. Maybe this part of your field is a little wet. Maybe this part of your field is a little dry. Maybe that part of your greenhouse has more airflow than other parts of the greenhouse. So you want to repeat it as much as you possibly can, randomize it as much as you possibly can. And when we don't, these things cause problems. You can probably think of a time when these things haven't been done. The study that proved that vaccines cause autism wasn't able to be repeated by other scientists. And as other scientists were not able to repeat that experiment, they became increasingly suspicious. And eventually, the author of the original study that supposedly proved that vaccines cause autism admitted that was totally made up. That scientist made up the results of that experiment. That's where repetition and peer review can come in very, very handy. Here's a kind of simple pictograph of how that can work. So if you notice that the average, if you just ran this here on mean 1, you'll notice that your average of all your plant heights is just a little bit higher than your average on your second experiment. So if you only ran this experiment once, you might think that your plants grew taller or your plants grew shorter than they should normally. If you ran this experiment multiple times, you would recognize that your average is probably somewhere in between what you've got showing on the screen here. We tend to look at various treatments. It's not important that you memorize these or really fully understand the difference, but basically what you're looking for is there an infinite number of options? For example, with fertilizer applications, or the amount of water that you can add to something. There is an infinite amount of water. Because you can have 1 ounce, 2 ounces, 1.5 ounces, 150 ounces, and anything in between. For things that are discrete, there's no real measurable level, and there's a finite number of options. The plant is either male or female. The plant either flowers or it doesn't. The plant either gets this disease or it doesn't get the disease. So what you're looking at is kind of an either or an infinite number of things. The infinite number of things is a little more challenging, obviously, but the discrete treatments don't give a whole lot of information sometimes. This is not the fun part for me. I don't like doing the statistics. I like doing the experiments. I like trying to figure out why, what happened, but I don't like running the actual statistics on things. Sometimes they're very easy to run. How high is each individual plant? How fast did they get that way? Did they flower? How long did it take them to flower? How many flowers did they have? How long did they flower? Those sorts of things. But then what you have to look at is, was it a significant difference? Remember the discussion in science terms of what significant actually meant? Was it just random chance? Was it that you noticed a little bit of difference, but statistically they really weren't all of that different? So you have to try to explain why you got the results that you did. And we always have to be on the lookout for confounding effects. Unintended bias. That's where the researcher thinks that they're going to get a certain effect. Now you think your hypothesis is this, and therefore you're going to look for that. If you always measure things in the same order, you might start looking for certain things because you're going to memorize how those first few plants are. So you want to randomize how you're measuring your plants if at all possible. Were there temperature variations in the greenhouse that you didn't necessarily anticipate? I remember walking through the Arboretum one day and I passed this experiment. It was roped off, big signs. It said no trespassing. All these signs, all this rope, and there were 4 deer in that little area happily munching on that experiment. They did not pay any attention to the no trespassing sign. So obviously that could impact your results. The thing that we have is, for most of us, we aren't growing in a greenhouse. Okay, obviously if you're a grower, yes you are. But if you are an agronomist, if you're working in landscaping or turf or park systems, if you are corn, soybean type farmer, then those are very, very large, complex systems. So it's very difficult to do experiments where you're controlling everything. So the challenge with ecology is these systems are huge, and it's very difficult to isolate cause and effect. Again, this is not for you to memorize the soil food web, but think about how complicated this is. Take a look at just these little bacteria right here. They impact 1, 2, 3, 4 different areas. So the impact and a change that impacted bacteria could immediately impact anything else. And if you impacted the protozoa, you're going to impact the nematodes. If you impact the nematodes, you could impact the arthropods. So you don't know the downrange impacts that you're going to have, which is why repetition and documenting everything you can becomes very important. This is looking at this line right down the middle, right here. This is somebody who actually was looking at the impact of grazing on the plant growth. And so this is ecological type research. You can see the impact. Now, I don't know where this picture shows up in the study, but this is somebody looking at the impact of grazing on large scale systems. It's really not any different if you're looking simply, quote unquote, at farming. Every change impacts so many different things. So let's say we make a change to the bedding of your animals. You have to ensure that nothing else changes that year. Well, that's nearly impossible. Are your animals exactly the same animals, or have you been repeating this over and over and over again with different animals, so that's okay? Did Mother Nature give you more or less rain than you would have normally, so the animals might behave a little bit differently? Again, repeating that over and over will have an impact. But if you change the bedding and you change their grazing, how do you know if it's the bedding that caused the positive or negative impact that you saw? You don't, because you've actually changed 2 different things. All right, so some effects take a long time. Ecology research takes a long time to do. So all of these areas are different research projects from around the world. So you can see even this first one, the long-term ecological impact. So this is their website, and what we're looking at is some of their research. All right, so if we look over here on the right-hand side, from breeding to feeding blue whales, ups and downs of coastal marsh evaluation, holistic approach to lake ecology, small water bodies with big carbon dioxide effects. So there's lots and lots of things. You can see here this picture in the middle. There's a research project in action right there, and if you read that caption, you'll see 1,100 permanent long-term experimental plots. That's a lot of experimental plots. The Centers for Environmental Farming Systems. All right, this is another one that does field research. You can see some of the different types of field research they have, both animal, small farm, organic, more traditional farming. So let's take a look at this alternative swine unit, for example. And you can see what their goals are. You can see the facilities and the animals. And this research organization is dedicated to helping farmers look at different methods of production and the pros and cons of those different methods. It's not just our country that does this. This is Rothamsted in the UK. And if you're looking at, again, look at there, a whole system approach. We aim to play a central role in delivering a win for all agriculture. So these guys have been going on for several years, actually, and so they're actually on Challenge 5 and 6 right now. What are the causes of existing yield and efficiency gaps? What are future crop and livestock systems? How are we going to attain environmental productivity and reducing environmental impacts? So what they want to make sure is that farmers and growers have the ability to do their farming long term. If you're more interested in ornamentals, here's the Missouri Botanic Garden. They do a lot of research as well. So if we look at their research areas, they have 4 major areas that they work with: exploration and discovery of new plants, organizing taxonomy and nomenclature of plants, collaborating with other institutions to do ornamental research, and looking at plants that have just been discovered to see if there's some sort of impact that they could have either in science, in medicine, in ecology, or simply as an ornamental plant. Publication is always important. Why do we need to publish? Well, we have to publish so that we can get the information out. Yeah, I get it. Not many people are going to read a scientific journal, but that's only where it starts. So you publish it in a scientific journal, somebody else picks it up, and then you get to summarize it so that other people can understand it, so that other people can repeat it, so that other scientists can be skeptical of it and look for errors, look for unintended biases, ask you questions that maybe you didn't think about. That's what peer review is all about. So everybody else can be skeptical of your experiments and looking for things that maybe you didn't think about when it comes to your own science. So this is just one more area that's showing some research. This is doing research in Yellowstone. They have lots and lots of different things in Yellowstone, and if you look at some of the challenges that Yellowstone has had in the past, some of the things like the reintroduction of the wolves and what is the impact that that had on ranching systems that were around the area, what impact did that have on the wildlife that was in the area. If we look at the wildfires that are burning right now, they might look at what is the impact of controlled burns. So this is just yet another place where people do research on large-scale ecological systems. Because it's important for us, regardless of the area that you're working in, that you understand the impact, the long-term, large-scale impact that everything that we do has. And that everything that we do might also be the negative impact on the farming from other ecological systems. It might be the negative impact from the farm on other ecological systems. It might be the negative impact that greenhouse irrigation has, or irrigating a turf system. So it goes back and forth, and the ultimate goal for a lot of these places is going to be, how can I make the farmers and the growers happy while minimizing damage to the environment at the same time? Okay, as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch.